Kiwis love a thirst. Like Finn, we're making waves. Generate. Switch online today.
Dame Julie Christie, welcome to my podcast.
Thank you. I'm very privileged to be here. You're a bit of a podcast legend now.
Oh, stop it.
All the good people do Dom's podcast. Why is that?
I don't, maybe because you can answer this. It's because I pester them and annoy them.
Who's interviewing who? Yeah, we have had a few, every meeting you did say that, so I very happily succumbed.
This has been, not happily, this has been over a year in the making, by the way. I went through our text exchange this morning and it's quite funny, there's like a lot of guests I have that sort of like put themselves forward, which I found quite strange in the beginning, but now I sort of appreciate it. And then there's people like you and Jeff Wilson's another one that just think they've got nothing to say. I went back through our text exchange, and one of the most recent ones from a few months ago was like, I've got nothing interesting to say, but I'm going to Saudi Arabia. Let's check in when I get back, and maybe I'll have something to say then. It's like, you're so humble.
Oh no, I don't think it's humility. I think it's kind of the poor girl from Greymouth is a bit of a well-trodden story, and so, you want to have something new and interesting to say, I guess. I'm a content person as well, and just dragging up old stuff doesn't seem that interesting.
Yeah. No, but it's a great story, though. And it's a story that's worth sharing. And there'll be a lot of, because you've been, as far as I'm aware, you've only done one other podcast. That was Paula Bennett's.
I did Paula's, yeah. Paula's a good friend of mine, like you are. So, that's why I did them.
So one of the texts I found when I was going back through our text exchange of me bullying you to come on my podcast is this. Do you want to read this one out? And we can get into that later on.
Oh, my God. Yes. Isn't that funny? Golly gosh, are you going to bring back every text I privately sent you and hand them to me? Well, I can't wait.
Well, we don't have to read it out if you don't want.
That's all right. The best presenters are the most disciplined. Marc Richardson is the best ever. I was talking about Paul Henry in this text, wasn't I? I said, Paul's ability to get you drunk in the morning is astonishing. Many a time he'd say, come and have a coffee, and you'd end up 3 bottles of red wine before lunch. My Holmes, Henry, Ridge, Ellis, etc. as stories are hair-raising, and they are hair-raising stories. The most gifted people are always the most hair-raising.
And we
and the most unfiltered.
We'll get into them in due course. I had Matthew Ridge on the podcast maybe a year and a half ago now, and he said he was overseas filming one of your shows with Marc Ellis when the whole drug charge thing sort of blew up back home.
It did.
And according to
I called them to tell them.
Yeah, according to Matthew Ridge, you tried to get hold of Marc, couldn't get hold of him, so you phoned Matthew, and you were like, I'm surprised it's the other one and not you. Something.
No, it was the opposite way around. Obviously, Matthew's recent kind of revelations have shocked even me, which is surprising because I didn't realise. I thought Matthew had ADHD, but I didn't realise. But, I spent a decade with those boys. I spent 2 years with John McEnroe, which was an experience in itself, an incredibly complex man, angry man, but, you can... one of the world's greatest ever tennis players, you can only admire him, and you say to yourself, I won't say lucky, I don't believe in luck, but I was truly fortunate to have had that experience with him, to have seen what a perfectionist he is and what drives him. And you very much see that too with Matthew Ridge, very much always been driven by perfection, especially on the sports field. So, and Paul Holmes, the same, Paul Henry, driven by himself. I love him, but he was so fabulously unfiltered, which obviously we don't have anymore.
God, I'm so excited to get into this. One thing all those names had in common, I'm guessing, is they're all flawed as well.
But aren't all interesting people flawed? All the great rulers of the world, all the really interesting, I guess famous people we've ever had in our times are enormously flawed. There's it's like being perfect isn't that interesting anymore. I find flaws I think flaws now is quite a good word. I think flaws used to be a little bit derogatory. Now I think it can be a really complimentary word because without flaws, you don't really understand the ups and downs of life, and without a roller coaster in life, what stories have you got to tell? I remember another one of my fabulously flawed friends, Sir Bob Jones. said to me once, he said, when we were doing Dragon's Den, I said, I'm thinking about retiring. And he said, don't. I retired when I was 32, he said, and it was fine for the first 3 months because people still wanted to lunch with me. But after that, I had nothing to talk about and I couldn't find anyone to go to lunch with. Don't retire young. That's what he said. And obviously, Bob has had a lot of stories because of his flaws.
Would he do a podcast? I have to get you to ask another time.
I'm not sure, actually, but
I'd let him smoke his pipe in my studio if that was.
I absolutely love him. I know that he says now he doesn't drink, but he drinks sherry. I don't drink anymore. I only drink sherry. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I absolutely love him. Last time I went to his house and saw him, he was showing me the pigeons that are out in his front lawn. He's a very deep thinker and an incredible reader, Bob. He just reads all the time. What I was most impressed to see, that he had a computer on his desk because for years he fought any form of technology, hated cell phones, wouldn't have anything to do with them.
He succumbed.
He succumbed, yeah.
Hey, man, this is going to be so much fun. Even though I know this is like your worst nightmare. I feel
it
almost
is a bit.
Because
Why?
What
are you going to drag up? Don't forget that you too were on Treasure Island, Dom. I've got some stories about you.
No, this is not, one thing about my podcast is like one of my priorities is to make sure the guest always has a really good time. So you have full edit control. So if there's, I just want you to feel as comfortable as possible.
Yeah, no, I am. I'm fine. I'm kind of used to it now. Yeah. I just want to know where all the red wine that you bestowed upon Paul Henry is. Where's the fridge?
Well, this is 10 a.m. He was an afternoon one, to be fair.
By the end of his podcast, I thought he's had at least 3 bottles.
So I've got a quote. By the way, you're 63 now, eh? You're looking great, by the way. Is that inappropriate to?
Thank you for the reminder. I'd forgotten.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you are you funny about your age or?
Yeah, always have been.
Really?
Yeah.
I bring that up because
I'm anti-aging.
I found a quote from you in 2009, so that's 15 years ago. So you would have been, what's that? My maths is terrible. 49. Will I be doing it when I'm 60? Absolutely not. I'll be living in my batch on the west coast of the South Island where there's no cell phone coverage.
Right. So
where did it go wrong?
So 18 months ago, they put in a cell phone tower. That's where it went wrong. Well, I did give up. I did give up TV for a decade and did boards, mostly government boards. But then I decided that I kept hearing Bob Jones in my ear and realised that I probably had retired too early. So 3 years ago, I bought Natural History New Zealand, NHNZ, which is a company out of Dunedin, expressly to make international documentaries because I realised that I can't be my best in the New Zealand market, that I'm at my best in the international market. So, and they already had a big international business. It's the oldest production company in New Zealand. It's 47 years old. So it just made sense. And so there I am, I'm back.
And you're still working hard, but not as hard as what you used to work, eh? You were maybe the hardest worker I've ever met.
I used to do a lot of hours. I was crazy ambitious, and very much a loner. We were really the only ones pushing that genre. I was, at the time I was living in LA and I was coming home every weekend to see my kids and I would just work.
By the way, that's a hell of a commute.
Well, as long as you can sleep on a plane, it was like an overnighter and then back. It's only 4 hours difference. I'd get on the plane at 7:30, be there at 11 o'clock in the morning, work the rest of the day. I've always been a person who gets off the plane and goes to work, so, and travels quite well. So, yeah, I was a crazy hard worker, but I got that from my mother. My mother also never believed in sitting down. Even when she sat down, she'd be knitting. She never believed in rest.
Active relaxer,
very much. And I think I kind of still am, really, that too.
Yeah.
Have you heard that term?
Have you not heard it?
No, is that a new term? Is
No.
that a new woke term, is it?
No, I think it's been around a while because I'm like that as well. Like my girlfriend's like, just sit down and watch a movie, but I'd rather be watching the movie while wiping the bench down or multitasking.
Yeah, I'm following Victoria Beckham's lead now. She says she only watches stuff she shouldn't be watching when she's on the treadmill. So when I want to watch all my crappy Netflix stuff, I have to be on the treadmill.
That's a great way to go about it.
You have run past me in quite a few marathons, so, I only do halves, you do whole ones. But, and so when I think about that when I'm on the treadmill, it's Dom shooting past me.
Yeah.
How many have you done now?
Stop trying to turn the tables. It's yeah, I don't know, maybe about 50 or so.
Oh, have you? Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I know what you're doing. It's like a deflection technique to try and eat up the time.
No, it's fine.
You brought up your mum, so we'll get into the early years of Dame Julie Christie. But first of all, since we were talking about your work ethic just before, I did hear a story about you, and it's probably one of those stories that sort of changed over the years. But the story about you when you were involved with This Is Your Life, you had something like a last minute rehearsal in the morning, went away for a elective cesarean at lunch, and was back for the show that night.
Close.
Oh my God, that's savage.
Didn't have elective cesarean, had the baby induced. Had the baby induced in the morning, 3 days out from This Is Your Life, thinking he would be there and I could still do it. He took a very long time to come, so I was left with a day and a half before the live This Is Your Life. So yes, I did do This Is Your Life the day after my son Tim was born, but I wouldn't advise anyone to do that now. And I've seen some pictures of me at that time, and I looked very, very stressed and very haggard. But it was Grant Fox's This Is Your Life. It was one of the ones I did with Bob Parker, because obviously I went through 3 different This Is Your Life hosts, and and it really was a great episode. But yes, that is true. But I wouldn't be that silly now.
No, but I think that speaks a lot about your I suppose your drive or your work ethic or your desire to be the absolute best at that particular time in your life.
Yeah, probably. But I also was determined that having children really wasn't going to make any difference. To me, I never saw it stop my mother, who had 7 under 12 when my father died. So I just always believed that I could just do it. It was just part of life.
Yeah. Okay, which brings us to this card.
I took a whole 2 weeks off for the second one.
Yeah. Wow. God, you must have been bored shitless. What was it? Well, like medical reasons? Like you must have been really bad.
I also may have got her induced as well.
Okay. Well, I've got this card. I've written early years, but I suppose that we could call this the poor little girl from Greymouth. Is that what you called it before? Yeah. So you're from Greymouth. Your dad died at the age of 32 from a brain hemorrhage.
47.
47. Oh,
my mum was
wrong.
32.
Okay. So she was 32 at the time. He was 47. You were 5 years old at the time. What are your memories? What are your memories of that? Do you remember anything of your dad?
Oh, yeah, I remember him, especially visually, and I remember him vaguely, not nearly enough. But I also grew up with a picture of my father on the television. It's probably told you something about families like ours. There was a black and white television, and that was that was a centrepiece of the lounge. In fact, it was such a centrepiece that I remember the cat would catch a bird and bring it in the house and put it on the television because that's what everybody looked at all the time. So I grew up. We didn't really have holidays, and we didn't kind of have any other form of entertainment. So I grew up watching television. I grew up watching all those great, which you're probably too young to remember, the great studio shows which used to come out of Avalon, like New Faces and Studio One and Happen In, and they used to make a lot of variety shows out of Wellington, and I grew up with those. And New Zealand television at that time was so vibrant. We used to just watch it all the time. My mother used to watch a soap opera called Peyton Place, which was supposed to be terribly adult at the time, and I was never allowed to watch it, so it always mystified me. But you'd always get sent off to bed so Mum could watch Peyton Place. But yeah, I think it's that television was such a huge part of my life growing up is the reason I drifted towards it, especially, I guess, the common touch form. Why
do you think that is? Do you think there's like a degree of escapism in there because, your life was so like sort of bleak and miserable? And
well, it certainly wasn't bleak and miserable. It was loving, and we were never like cold and starving. But you just didn't, there wasn't money for holidays. There wasn't money for jeans. There was homemade clothes. It was just the way it was. It was an incredible struggle for her. She was on a widow's benefit. She wouldn't take charity, but she believed so much in education. So everything was about getting us educated. So you tried really hard at school because Mum wouldn't have it any other way, and you never had any sickness or any days off school because she believed so much in education. And to this day, I think if parents believed that much in education, we would have a lot less problems in this country.
Yeah,
because
100%.
It's so important. And so that is the answer to getting out of poverty. You can talk about everything else, but it's all about education because it changes everything. And so for my entire family, we were all educated. I mean, I don't have a university degree, but I went to journalism school only for a year, but it's the education that changed everything.
Yeah, so your mum, so widowed at 32, at the time 7 kids under the age of 12. I believe she raised you guys on like a diet of like silver beet and porridge.
Oh, I hated porridge. I hate porridge to this day. I cannot stand even looking at porridge. No, she was great with, Mum could take any steak and make a great stew or a great vegetable soup. But she did insist on porridge every morning, and I hated it. I didn't like milk, and therefore, porridge without milk, and I hated it. And I still to this day cannot stand silver beet, Brussels sprouts, corned beef. Yes. And I may have once called them poor people's food, but which just sounds really derogatory. But when you grow up like that, but at the same time, honestly. She also would make some great stuff too. Jam sandwiches, jam and cream sandwiches, actually. Things like that. And every birthday she'd still make a cake, and it was just a different life. But she did everything she possibly could for us, and we certainly were never hungry.
And she did so well. I know your brother better than I know you.
I've got 4 of them.
Yeah, in particular your brother Leo, who's ran for Auckland Mayor a couple of years ago and runs a bar called HQ in Auckland's Viaduct. I've known him since like 30 years or so.
Palmerston North Boys, I believe.
Yeah. I first met him when he was a mobile vet. And then he opened up a bar called the Fat Lady's Arms. But I believe all the other siblings have done very well for themselves in their respective fields as well.
Yeah, they are. I mean, my brother Mike, who started working for me in 1995, actually, when I not long after I set up Touchdown, and when I left television 2013, he took over. Him and Greg Heathcote, his co-managing director at Warner Brothers Television. So he's continued on. Yeah, they all have. They're all, we're a really close family, but everybody is very much a product of our mother. Because I guess because Dad died so young. So there's a really big work ethic. And there's almost, I feel there's almost a guilt if you're not working, a guilt over relaxing, because it must have been driven into me sometimes. But then even when I'm relaxing, some idea for a TV show is still winding around in my mind.
God, there's some parallels, eh? I'm much the same. I do. I feel sort of like guilt or even a little bit of shame if I'm like relaxing or not progressing my goals or whatever. There's another thing. This is certainly the case for me, and I'm wondering if it's the same for you as well. I've always had kind of maybe like an unhealthy relationship with money, because it felt like I look back now and I think we were very middle class growing up in Palmerston North, but I felt like we were poor. Like I'd run out of a 50-sheet refill pad and I'd need to buy another one, and I'd sometimes like spend 3 or 4 days plucking up the courage to ask Dad for the $4 to buy it, because I knew that it'd snap at me. So it always felt like there was like a definite shortage of money in our household, and that's made me sort of like money focused to a degree. Do you think it's the same for you? Like
I get that now. I didn't see it at the time, but that's been, financial security has been a huge driver for my success. I saw my mother age from when my father died. She aged very, very quickly. I mean, I think she went grey within about 3 months. She was just, and the stress that the stress of earning enough, whether she be cleaning at night or earning enough to ensure that she could look after her children, definitely aged her. And I have always been driven by wanting to be financially secure. Money doesn't buy you happiness, but it does buy you freedom. And there is a trap in not being financially secure. So, yes, it's always been a big driver. And I'm not ashamed to say that that's why I chose the television genre. I chose because I knew I could take that internationally, and therefore I could earn a really good living.
Yeah. Yeah, and your mum, she must have been so proud of you. Like I heard she passed away 10 years ago, right? She
did, yeah. She was very proud of me. She was there when I got my ONZM, when I got my first honours, and she was so proud. It's strange because she was also incredibly loyal. When she died very suddenly, none of us saw it coming because she was seemingly so healthy. But when I went to her house and we were clearing out her things, I found a letter she'd written to Paul Holmes. There was, you probably remember well when Lana Cocroft got sick in Treasure Island, and
you stood on some coral.
Yeah, well, no one will ever know how it happened, but yeah, very possibly. And Paul Holmes kind of began kind of a bit of a campaign blaming me, even though I wasn't actually on that series. And Mum had written this letter to him, this fiercely defensive letter of her daughter. And thank heavens she'd never posted it. And then she'd written another one and never posted that. And I found these letters, and it was very insightful. And she's also a woman who she wrote letters to both of my children when they were babies. And when you read that and you hear her tell the story of how my father died and that, it makes you incredibly close to your parents.
That's wonderful.
It is,
Could imagine
isn't it?
if she was alive now with a Twitter account. It should be.
I know. Oh, can you imagine? We did
be.
not long before she died. We finally taught her how to use an iPad, and she'd write the whole email into the subject line. But at that time, we had a racehorse with Leo, and Mum was able to watch the horse. When the horse won, Mum was able to watch it again and again and again on the iPad. So she was able to feel like it was winning again and again. So yeah.
So you were in your 50s when she passed away. So you're a grown ass woman, very well established in your own career. But does the grief still hurt though?
Well, I think it did, because I think at that time I was kind of a little bit more worried about the rest of my family. You know.
Why? Are you the eldest?
No, I'm fifth.
Right. Why are you worried about everyone else?
A bit of a matriarch, perhaps.
Okay.
I think, my mother probably saw quite a lot of personal strength in me. And but yeah, I was very worried about others. And I mean, my younger brother and younger sister both lived in Greymouth where Mum lived, and they were obviously very close to her. So I still now, it still hurts now that it was so sudden. You know, it was the day after Mother's Day, actually. So yeah, but it means virtually everyone had spoken to her in the last couple of days. So yeah.
Yeah, was there anything left unsaid?
Oh no, I think Mum knew how much we all appreciated her. You know, I tended to, when things got quite stressful, I'd go home. Wouldn't need to say anything to her, but she'd be making the veggie soup and making the stew and cooking your sausages for breakfast and all the things that she knew you loved, and there was no porridge to be seen.
Not a silver bead in sight.
I'd go down to KFC and grab her a couple of bits of KFC because she loved KFC.
Oh, yeah. I guess it must sting when big things happen, like the day that we're recording this. You're getting an award this week, like basically a Lifetime Achievement Award, and you're being given the Dame title. It must sting at moments like that she's not around to see these things.
My mother was quite a traditionalist. I don't think she would have cared about the television one, but she would have loved the Damehood. Her biggest thrill when I got my ONZM was actually meeting the Governor General. That was what she really loved, because he was a good Catholic. So that's what Mum really loved. But yeah, you do. You know, you care. Or like when I got my Damehood, there was a little bit of criticism, and my mother would have felt that probably more deeply than I did.
Oh, she would have been writing more letters.
Writing letters and hopefully not sending them.
Yeah, we'll get to some of that criticism, because some of it was really, really personal, and actually you look back now, like quite offensive and uncalled for. Can't you let someone have their fucking moment, you know? Oh
yeah, and can't you actually do a bit of research before you rip in? But anyway, that's all fine.
So early career. So your first job was working in a hospital laundry.
Yes.
Is this when you were at school? Was this like a part-time thing?
Yes, at school. This was between school and journalism. Right. I spent a summer working in hospital laundry. So it was.
It's a good way to discover what you don't want to do with your life.
It is. And it was a job, you know. It was a job. And so I worked there, and then I went off to Wellington to just a 1-year journalism school, Wellington Polytech, for a year. Yeah,
why not Teachers College? You wanted to be a teacher.
I actually applied for journalism, which was 1 year, graphic arts, which was 2, and teaching, which was 3 years. I got into all of them, but I figured I could only stand poverty for 1 year. It was that is literally why I became a journalist, because it was only 1 year. That's how, I guess, I was trying to escape my childhood. Yeah, and yes, your Teachers College, some might say poverty for 3 years, then a lifetime of poverty. Exactly, and I would have been a terrible teacher. Oh, can you imagine? I do not have the patience. I admire great teachers, but I do not have the patience for teaching, you know. Yeah, so you become a journalist. Where do you work? Is it Auckland Star? No. I started at the Evening Post, and then went down to Christchurch, actually, to the community newspapers down there, and then off to England, where I worked on the London Sun. and on the Daily Mail in their sports departments. And then when I came back, I worked at the Auckland Star and then the Auckland Sun. So I've been through quite a few newspapers, mostly in sub-editing by the time, before I went to television. And really, probably being a headline writer actually taught me quite a lot about. Certainly I've used that skill many times, been thinking of the titles for TV shows.
Right.
Because you have to write headlines, you see.
Yes, yeah.
And they're a great way of summing up a story and dragging people into the story.
Oh, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way. And actually now with I've got a social media going with YouTube, like the thumbnail and the caption is everything.
It is, yeah, it is. I've just done a series with NZR Plus, and it's called Poi Stories. It's with the Black Ferns. I'm not sure if you remember the Women's Rugby World Cup, how big Poi was. We gave away 33,000 in the stadiums. Eden Park was full of Poi. That was probably at least equally one of the greatest achievements of my life, the Women's Rugby World Cup 2 years ago. And 7 of the Black Ferns, probably the biggest names in the game, have gone back to create a Poi troupe to see if they can, become great exponents of Poi. And I look at that and I kind of started out, first TV series I ever produced was Mud and Glory Great Rugby Stories, and the last one I've done is Poi Stories, with the Black Ferns. So it's gone I've gone a full circle, but certainly, when I look at that one and I see there's kind of great possibilities, but when I look at it on YouTube, where it's on the All Blacks YouTube channel, I'm like, it's so, like you say, the taglines that they have to put on it, I'm like, how's anyone going to find their way here? But obviously YouTube, now the biggest platform in the world, they do. And YouTube is only getting bigger and it's pretty much going to be the platform. But for me personally, still hard to find stuff. Yeah. But so go watch Poi Stories on YouTube, the All Blacks channel on YouTube, please.
Yeah. I don't
fantastic.
I don't understand it. That's why I outsource. Like it's when you understand the importance of the caption and the thumbnail and everything else, it's like someone else can do that for me.
Yeah,
I don't have the bandwidth.
It's brilliant, but I mean, obviously, under 25s use it more than all the other platforms put together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, wow.
Okay, so from journalism, you end up in TV. Is this where was your first job with Communicado and Neil Roberts? Yeah,
I got made redundant when Auckland Sun newspaper closed down. So the share market crash in 87 was the launch of that. It coincided with the launch of that paper, and it closed down 333 days later.
Wow.
And I tried to freelance, but I ended up, lying on the sofa and watching soap operas. I wasn't very good at freelancing, and I ended up getting offered a job on a corporate video, actually, just doing a bit of research for Neil Roberts, and the rest is history. It's like the light came on. Suddenly I was like, wow, this TV stuff, I can do this.
Because I suppose it was always sort of sitting there due to your, the impact that TV had on your life growing up. And
yeah, I think the common touch too was always sitting there. And so
common touch, how do you mean?
The ability to create content for a broad audience is what I'd call it, really, now. That's the long version. I just call it the common touch. Definitely had that because I am part of that audience. I always have been. And very few critics or journos are part of that broad audience who uses television as an escape, as I did when I was growing up. So, I kind of feel like I understand that audience.
Yeah. Oh, you do, better than anyone else.
Less now, because they're all on. I don't go near TikTok. I know you're a tweeter. I'm not a tweeter.
No, I'm not.
I thought you were a tweeter.
No.
Is that just a rumour?
I just found it too. I used to love Twitter, but I just found it too negative in the end. It added nothing to my life, and it's like so you get to the point you're like, why do I like? These aren't people I know in real life. Like no one speaks to me like this in real life. Like why would I get worked up and have my day ruined by someone I don't even fucking know?
Exactly.
So Neil Roberts, what was he like? I've heard it sounds like he was tough and uncompromising, but did he sort of shape the person you are or the person you became as a boss?
Oh no. He was. Talk about a tremendously flawed character. They don't come any more flawed. He was a big drinker, a big socialiser. Loved women like he loved life itself.
Was he a product of the time? Late 80s was quite hedonistic, eh?
Well, he spent a lot of time in the press gallery, and he was kind of like the anti-press gallery guy. And I actually made a documentary with Rob Muldoon once, and Rob Muldoon and my father were in the same platoon in the army. And when I mentioned that to Rob Muldoon, then he really, he loved me then because, he remembered my father. And Selwyn Toogood, you probably don't remember him.
Yeah, it's in the bag.
Yeah, they were all in the same platoon in the army, you see. So I made this it was part of this documentary series called Magic Kiwis, and Neil, in spite of spending a lot of time in the press gallery, had this kind of begrudging respect for Rob Muldoon. And we were sitting there in the parliamentary chambers, and Neil was really, really nervous. And I'm like, wow, I've never seen this guy nervous. Like, he was Mr. Suave Suits, I hadn't ever tasted Bollinger until I worked there, I spent most of my time driving him round in his left-hand Porsche because he was always losing his licence, When him and Bob Jones decided to belt some taxi with a piece of wood, I'm like on pickup. When his cat ran away, so they called me. I think my number was on the cat's collar. This is how ridiculous it was, really. So I ended up being like a crazy 24/7 PA there. But he taught me a lot. He used to say, tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you told them. Well, it's never that simple. But he did, obviously, being so close to him and being, I guess, to a degree his protege, I did learn an enormous amount quickly. But I saw tremendously bad behaviour as well, which I just shrugged my shoulders and off I went.
Because I suppose at the time, like there's words for it now, like toxic behaviour or power imbalance or whatever the catchphrase is. But I suppose at the time it was just
just get on with it. Yeah, which I did, and I didn't really think much about it at the time. But I absolutely loved him, for what he taught me and the opportunities he gave me. But in the end, after 3 years, I'd started to get, I got the Rachel Hunter CoverGirl documentary up, and I'd started to bring in more and more work, and I asked for a pay rise, and they said no.
Yeah, I heard this story. So you were on...
they said no. I was
you were
on
on 45, which was good money at the time?
Ish.
Pretty good. And then you wanted 70.
I did. I wanted 72.
And they said no, so you were like,
they said no. And I was like, all right then, stamped my foot, off I went.
Yeah, before we get into the next chapter, because I feel like this is a pivotal moment in the Dame Julie Christie story. The Rachel Hunter CoverGirl documentary, I tried to find that on NZ On Screen or YouTube. I couldn't find it anywhere, but I vaguely remember that. It was an event watching it.
It was huge.
It was massive.
She'd only been married to Rod for 3 months, and I got him to do an interview, and he hadn't done one for many years, I think, at that time. I mean, she was, we were all obsessed with that story. She was marrying the rock star. And
it's hard for people to imagine now just how famous Rachel Hunter was.
Oh, my God. And she was she'd then done 4 Sports Illustrated covers, her and Elle Macpherson were kind of the girls next door. And she was, and I went to their house in LA, and and I absolutely loved her down to earth nature. And I interviewed her agent, who said, it's such a pleasure to deal with a girl who doesn't order Cristal, all every day, and she was so down to earth, and she really was the tip-top ice cream girl, and he was great. I always loved him. I'd loved him before that. It was a tremendous thrill for me to meet him. I was incredibly excited when I met Rod. But yes, and I think it's still the highest rating documentary ever. I mean, we didn't have many channels then, but it's huge. It was huge. Everyone watched it.
Yeah, massive, like over 1 million people.
Would have been more than that. Rated a 37. I don't even know what that is now, but nothing would ever do 37 now. Election night wouldn't do a 37 now. I don't think anything.
Incredible. How did you convince Rod Stewart to come on? Did you
he was a man newly in love. He was besotted. He came to every shoot I did with her, and I guess he would have. He did it. He would do anything for H.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so after that you leave Communicado. Did you start Touchdown straight away?
Yes, on the dummy spit. Yes, I did. The dummy
spit. So you're how old at the time?
I have to tell you this though. When they found out I was serious about leaving, they offered me 120.
Oh, that's so cynical, eh?
But by that stage, I'd already lined up my first show, so it was good. Yeah, so yeah, I did, and TVNZ let me use some offices opposite theirs, and gave me a couple of small shows, and it really grew from there. It grew reasonably fast for about 4 years until there was a change of management at TVNZ, and then they took all those shows off me and put them inside in-house. And that was my biggest learner, because I learned that I'd been signing contracts where I had no rights to my own shows, and so I never did that again. So that was the pivotal point where everything changed. If I could own my own IP, own my own shows, and then a little bit later, I started getting criticism for the genre I'd chosen to make, and I went to see a woman called Jenny Rayner. She was like a PR guru. And I said, what am I going to do? They all hate me. This is after a ridiculous headline in the Evening Post in Wellington, crap TV, thy name is Julie Christie, said. And I was like, what am I going to do? And she said to me, you know what? Unless you get run over by a bus tomorrow, they're never going to see anything nice about you. So she said that, she had, I won't say who it is, but she quoted a very, very famous client of hers at the time who had the same problem and no appreciation in spite of his achievements. And she said, you just got to go overseas. Just got to do it overseas. And sure enough, then I started to focus on what genre, what could I take overseas. And I realised I could make shows in New Zealand and then reversion them overseas. So I went to Middlemarch with Marc Ellis, actually. Middlemarch, I don't know if you know, they have a single ball there where because there's not enough women in that area.
Where is it, like Canterbury or Otago?
No, Otago, not far, a couple of hours from Dunedin. And there's a big shortage of women, and they needed nurses, they needed more women for all the farmer boys, so the farmer boys don't leave home, And so they'd run this ball, this singles ball, and we took 5 girls, single girls from Auckland. You can see the show. Before every show did that. And it was a husband hunt, basically, and we spent about 4 or 5 days there and came back and made it a TV show. And I looked at it and I went, I could take that somewhere else. So I cut it down, called it Husband Hunt, and took it to the States and sold it to Fox, who called it Looking for Love, Bachelorettes in Alaska. And next thing it has 3 helicopters, 11 crews, and a whole bunch of incredibly beautiful women in bridal dresses walking up a mountain in Alaska. They just, obviously, when you take a small idea that we have here and you take it to the States, it gets supersized. And so that was the beginning, really. That was the first. And then I thought, wow, I can make television in New Zealand for the world. I just wasn't that much into making New Zealand television. I wanted to make television for the world, and that's what it's always been, and that's what it still is. And I've got nothing to apologise. It created all the value in my company. Because you don't make money making shows; you make money when you sell a company. Yeah, which I've sold twice. So.
Yeah, that's one thing. You just looping back to something you said before. Yeah, one thing before I knew you personally, I from afar, you just struck me as a person that wouldn't give a fuck about what anyone thinks, because you're so self-assured and so confident in what you're doing. But those negative reviews and things, they really do hurt you, eh? And mean remarks about reality TV and things. Over the years, you're way more sensitive. You're like a marshmallow, I guess.
Thanks. I better sit up straighter so I don't look like a marshmallow.
No, you know what I mean? You're quite soft in the middle.
They used to much more. I think I did care incredibly what my clients thought. So the client is actually the broadcaster. So I always had very strong relationships with the broadcasters. And so I would... So I did care incredibly what they thought. The newspaper journos were so whiny. And what I really wanted to say was, clearly it's because you can't make it on television. You got a face for radio, we used to say before lovely people like you came on. And before being on radio, or before audio included pictures. That's what amazes me about podcasts. How come they all have the pictures too now? Anyway.
YouTube.
Yeah. And but yes, was I sensitive? Sometimes when it was very unjust, I was hurt. But then it didn't matter, because in the US they love me, and so I was doing so well overseas. It kind of erased it, and then I didn't care. And what do you know? I come back, having made it overseas, and suddenly I get an ONZM from a Labour government, like, make me fall over, please. So I was kind of, and then I started to do some things like, my first government board was New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, and then New Zealand Story, and then I started doing more and more things in my country because I'm so patriotic, and the flag consideration panel. When you had to be crazy to go on that, you couldn't win. You were going to get bashed. I didn't care. I was like, let's get a flag that doesn't look like it's Australian, and I cared, and so I was able to talk myself out of it by taught myself out of caring, really. I mean, it's been brought up to me now. We might as well address it, shall we? That Simon Wilson called me a culture vulture.
I've got that.
Cultural vulture, was it? A cultural vandal. Cultural vandal.
Cultural vandal.
I mean, for heaven's sake. When I got my Damehood, he wrote this big article about why I shouldn't have got my Damehood.
Yeah. I've got that. That's coming up, and
and I go,
nothing
that is
like
a great
dame.
example. This great example, of a man who could never make it in television and has been kind of like jealously picking away at it ever since. But it didn't bother me, but it would have bothered my mother.
Yeah, the headline: "Nothing like a dame." Why Julie Christie's honour is an insult to our TV industry. Yeah, I mean, that's got a sting.
Well, he missed the 4 movies that my success in Unscripted has funded. He missed, the drama I've done. How can you call This Is Your Life, one of the greatest film that's ever made, and insult to the industry? How can you call the fact that I won an AIDS award for my Mr. and Mr. documentary? So you ignore all that. You ignore all the government boards, all are slaving away. When they pay lousy, let me tell you, because I care so much about our country, and just say, oh, I don't like Treasure Island, so she doesn't deserve a Damehood. It's just ignorant.
Yeah, but even take away all the stuff, the boards and the movies and whatever, and take the reality TV stuff for what it is. It was your job was to make like a commercially palatable product, and you kicked ass.
Had to be a lot more than palatable. It had to be incredibly commercially successful.
And it was. Treasure Island.
It's in its 20th season. In 3 countries. It's in its 20th season. Game of Two Halves was 11 seasons. It didn't get 11 seasons for no reason. It got 11 seasons because people loved it. And I think My House, My Castle was 7 years. Like a lot of these shows, you make them, you don't last 5 minutes if a lot of people don't watch them. It used to be 9:30 every morning the ratings would come out, and you lived and died by your ratings. We were judged every single day. You know what radio ratings are like. We only had
twice a year.
Twice a year. We had them every single day. And if your show went in at Sunday 7:30 or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at 7:30, if you didn't win that slot, it was over. And how are we going to pay your staff? So actually, it was by far the hardest genre to be in. I mean, Jerry Bruckheimer, who's probably one of the greatest drama producers ever out of the States, he also makes Amazing Race. And he will say, I'd much rather make drama because you know what's going to happen the next day. You got a script, you know what they're going to say. He says, as soon as you go into Unscripted, you'll just know, so I don't call it reality, Unscripted, he said, you don't know. So it wasn't an easy choice. It was a choice to make things for the broadest possible audience. It's like, I'd be really proud if I invented Barbie, because of the joy that she's brought to the widest possible audience. Why don't we celebrate that? Why are we nasty and jealous?
Yeah, it's weird. Like I'm at an age now.
You were never nasty and jealous, Dom.
No, I'm at an age now where I don't understand. Like my partner loves Love Island, and I find it tedious, and I can't watch it. But I'm not going to shit on it because I understand there's a market for it.
I only worry about the parents watching their children on it. Yeah. Imagine if you're a dad watching your daughter.
Okay, so it's not called reality. What did you call it? It's not reality
Unscripted.
TV. Unscripted.
You very seldom hear it called reality anywhere else in the world. It's pretty much called Unscripted, yeah. And that's what I think of it as, because it's everything from, The Chaser, which you probably watch. Everybody watches that,
wouldn't you just, most people just call that a game show.
Yeah, but what's wrong with her? It's fantastic, isn't it? And it's gone on for years, and it's remade all over the world.
It's brilliant. The thing I love about The Chase is first episode you watch it, you're like, what the fuck's going on here? Yeah. It's really hard to follow. And then
are you only allowed to make shows which are very earnest and bleat at you? I mean, I come home from working in a factory and, and I have my dinner and I want to sit down on the sofa. Do I want to sit down and be bleated at, or do I really want to imagine I'm on a Treasure Island competing for $50,000 and laugh at everybody else's mistakes? And It's escapism, and we should be really proud of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are the keys to making good unscripted television?
Finding unfiltered people, which was quite hard in New Zealand, easy in the US market because most people are unfiltered. In other words, verbalise their every thought. They say what they think. They don't necessarily think before they say. We're a little bit more guarded. But as you'll know, having done Treasure Island, and you were, by the way, on the season where I think arguably the best competitor ever, and you'll know who I mean, I think, Lance O'Sullivan.
Lance and Bridget O'Sullivan, yeah.
They were incredible, probably the best competitors ever, probably closely followed by Josh Cromfell, but they were. Oh. I still look at the winners and think, Lance and Bridget would kill it even to this day. You go, you kind of, I can't remember what I was talking about now. What did you ask me? I got confused.
Oh, yeah, what are the keys?
The keys, yeah, so they're unfiltered. But also, as you know, you go on it thinking, I'll never say anything dumb or that, and then 2 or 3 days in, you forget about the cameras being there, and everybody thinks they can go in and be really stoic, and then 2 or 3 days, and you just forget, don't you?
Yeah, because I can't remember what year I was on Treasure Island, but I remember very early on, I think it was Greg, is that the guy that was?
Greg Heathcote,
yeah. So he sat me down for like one of the little interviews and he was like, oh, what do you think of Simon Dool? And I was like, oh, well, we're on different teams. I haven't had a lot to do with Dooley, but he seems like a nice guy, so yeah. And then he was like, cut. He goes, hey, Dom, we just spoke to Dooley before. He thinks you're a fucking asshole. He thinks you're a backstabber. So he goes, we can stick with what you've said, but if it comes out, you're gonna look like you're full of shit. So you want to go again? And then suddenly it's like, this was like day 2 or day 3. It was like, oh, okay, game on.
Did he really? Because what we did used to do is we were a bit naughty. We always have RTs, do you remember, in the year? And if you got someone to cry, you'd go $50.
But I think in terms of, I can't remember.
It's very emotional. Your series was a very emotional series, and Dooley had a hard time in that one. He really did have a hard time.
He had a bad back, I think.
Oh yeah,
back issues,
and we were running all over that darn island up that hill. There was no water on that island. I mean, we lived on the island next to you. Remember? Was Matthew the host when you were there, or was it?
And that was John Stevens.
John Stevens was the host. Yeah, rockstar host. But you really hope that people, you want to bring out the things that people like Dooley are incredibly competitive. Another absolute favourite of mine is Eric Murray. Oh, and poor Eric Murray was on the edge of woke in the fact that Eric Murray only knew how to compete, but he had several people against him who thought that he was playing on their mental health by competing too hard.
Oh yeah, you'd hate it now. Like it's changed quite a lot. Like we were starving. The year that we did.
I did give you a bottle of wine at night to shut you up, though. I think, didn't I?
Did we? Absolutely.
Yeah, you were.
I think we went the first 3 days without any food at all. Like no rice, no flour, or anything. Now they have like a camping platform
beds and food. Yeah,
it's a whole duty of care thing.
Yeah, and no one wears itsy bitsy bikinis or all that sort of thing. Recently there was an article published, an old photo from Treasure Island, and there was Nikki Watson and Sally Ridge and Louise Wallace, and they're all wearing cargo pants way down past their hips and bikini tops and big sunglasses and the whole everyone very much they would all wear bandanas. They looked like they could be marooned much more, I guess.
Or contestants on Love Island.
Yes.
Which is a format that's working pretty well, to be fair.
Wendell Saylor wore one pair of maroon Speedos for the entire month, and they had a hole ripped in the butt about halfway through the series, but he kept wearing them anyway. That's all he wore. So, you guys didn't have a lot. It was different. Now they would say that it doesn't give you a lot of content, depriving you of things. But I liked that.
But when I did the series of Treasure Island and you were there, I think, had you sold your company at that point? You were very successful and a very rich woman, but this is the thing that stands out to me. You were hands-on, like you were there first thing every morning on the boat that came over from the crew island. You were overseeing every little bit of the operation.
That was very much off the back of the Chair. So the Chair was the big John McEnroe game show. So John fronted it in the US and in the UK.
And Matthew Ridge did a version of it here.
Here. And then it went all around the world to 29 different countries. So there were different hosts in the different countries. And it lasted for, I think, 5 years in France. And
so was it, I'll just pause you there. Yeah. So it's a game show where the contestants have a heart rate monitor on.
If you can't keep your heart under control, you're not allowed to answer the question, and therefore your money starts going backwards. Mm-hmm. So imagine you're looking, the host asks you a question and you're so excited, your heart goes pump, pump, pump. If your heart goes over 120, and if your normal is 60 to 80, you probably know that being an athlete, it goes over 120, you've got to get it under 120 in order to give the answer to get money. If you've already got money, your money starts ticking backwards. So you would see people on $250,000 get so excited and all the money would tick away. So it was great.
Yes,
except in some countries, like I'll never forget, Iran, they made it in Iran, and people's heart rates didn't go up. They could keep their hearts under control. And also we learned some things like clearly, I won't do it because it'll look really bad, but cross-eyed looking at your nose, doing various yoga tips helped keep your heart under control, we found. Right. And then we also started to drug test people, and people had taken beta blockers in the US. They did all sorts of crazy things. So it was... it was a great time though, and so it was that really that made the company incredibly successful. That which brought iWorks, were a Dutch media company, in, and they bought the company in 2007. So that was really the beginning. That was how all of that unfolded. And I stayed for another 6 years, but I also owned the Living Channel and Food TV, the two Sky channels. So that it kind of rolled on from there, really.
Yeah, so your company, your baby, Touchdowns, that sold for $40 million?
No.
No?
No.
Is that a rumour? No.
It was a really bad rumour.
No, but
that's a reason you should never believe the NBR Rich List, because it was so far not true. There's no production company in New Zealand anything like worth that sort of money.
But how much did you get out of it? Do you say or no?
I did all right.
Yeah.
Like
10?
It set me up. It set me up well. I went and bought an Aston Martin DB9. Found that actually it wasn't very good on the roads because our roads are so bumpy, kept scraping along the roads. But now,
I mean, as you said at the beginning, like money, the stress of money is not a good thing to have, but money doesn't actually buy you happiness. But I suppose you need to make a lot of money to realise that.
It does, and it does buy you. It does buy you a degree of freedom. But it came at a lot of cost. My kids would say to this day, that I wasn't around enough when they were growing up, and you can end up having regrets. But at the same time, they've also had privileges. They've travelled the world with me because of the fact that I was able to afford it. So it's kind of, you can't have all mum and being a school teacher. They would have had a different life. So and I think only now they really appreciate that, that they had that privilege. But at the same time, they would say, like my daughter told the story that, they'd hear the garage door open, they go rushing down the hallway hoping it'd be me and it'd be their father, and they go, So I know, and I break your heart, especially when she tells it to the Woman's Weekly. Then it really breaks your heart.
Oh my God, that is heartbreaking.
It wasn't.
Yeah, do you?
Yeah.
Because you've never been like a work-life balance person.
No, I am now.
Yeah, but I mean, time's non-renewable. You can't get those moments or that time back. Actually, I had
but Dom, you can't achieve like
no, it's decisions, eh?
I couldn't have been a normal mother. We always had a live-in nanny. We always had, right from the very beginning, in the same nanny all their children's lives. So I don't think, the children were never lacking in love, especially with my big close family. But at the same time, I did make compromises, especially with working in the States.
Yeah, I found this photo online.
Oh, yes. There they are.
Yeah, what do you think when you...
Timothy and Lexi. I think how thin am I? No, I think, I know that time. Yeah, they were 9 and 11. Yeah.
Yeah, what's your relationship like with them now? Do they resent you not being there enough? Or,
no. They'll tend to remind me at convenient times, but no, now they're both great. I mean, my son's 30, so he's a cardiac scientist. He lives in Colorado. He's about to come home for a month, actually, so I'm really excited. And my daughter is, she's still here in Auckland, and she's fantastic. She's a chip off the old block, though she has absolutely no filter. So she'd be a fantastic contestant on a reality show. But they're both great. We have a very, very strong relationship.
Oh, that's cool. I'm sure they understand.
Yeah, I think they do. They understand now the privileges they've had, and they understand the places they've been. And honestly, they used to say, Mum, can we just... I'm not a person who... like, I don't go to Fiji because I don't like lying in the sun. I'm a person who, I like to go places. I love theme parks. I love doing stuff. The kids would say, Mum, can we just do nothing? So to them, it was like, oh, no, here she goes again. We'll be going on holiday, and I used to make them write a diary every night of what they'd done. Here she goes again. She'll just have activities every day. So I'm like, we had great experiences, didn't we? Because your mother forced you to go to every Disneyland in the world.
Yeah. So... Oh, The Chair, getting back to The Chair. So that's The Chair is your most successful show?
Financially, by far. I think.
How many countries was it sold to?
29.
Wow.
At that time. That's the format, of course. So that's to make the show in all those different countries. And that was the sort of television I wanted to make. And we sold a lot. We sold So You Want to Be a Pop Star, which brought celebrities in to try and be a pop star, and that became a finalist in Rose d'Or, which is the biggest international unscripted awards. And we kind of Treasure Island was made in Australia, an Australian version and an Irish version, as well as New Zealand. And to me, that was always the idea, is that I'd be able to make a show in New Zealand and then sell versions of it overseas. Did the money game here in Australia, in South Africa. Same with Going Straight here and also in South Africa. And
What's Going Straight?
So that was a game show where you had to follow a straight line no matter what. You just had to go over or under or whatever, but you couldn't leave the straight line.
Random. How does that work? Oh, I have to find that. Maybe
hard.
It's on New Zealand on screen.
It is. It's quite hard.
The Chair, though, yeah, so 23 million in royalties? Is that a figure or no?
Yeah.
Yeah, would that be about right? Shit. Wow.
No, I think that was 1 year, this best year. That doesn't happen again.
No.
So that does show, that does show. But, I mean, I read a story that, I think ITV collected, or was it, might be BBC, represented Who Wants to Be a Millionaire internationally and collected 200 million in 1 year for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So The Chair came on the back of the huge success of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which is why it was relatively easy to sell into the States. But I loved working in the States because to them, unscripted is at least as important as drama, and it's very, very respected and very much a stalwart of every television schedule, because you have to have it, because drama costs so much money, so you have to balance it out. So yeah, and the same in England. It's obviously really important. We don't really have a game show mentality here, but
do we not?
No. How long since we've had a local game show?
Family Feud, maybe? Would that have been the?
That would have been the last one. You're right, and we hadn't had one for a long time before that. Whereas in England, they're all the time, and it slightly annoys me that we see them in our prime time. We got English. Why are we seeing so many English game shows? And we're seeing a lot of Australian content too now. And I think the issues in our television mean that's pretty much all we're going to see. We will have more Australian and English content, and we're going to have far, far less local. Like things that we need. We need The Block. We need Treasure Island. It's great to have a local Married at First Sight. We need a lot of those shows. Many critics will say, no, we don't. We can just have worthy documentaries, shall we?
No, but it's nice to have them there, and you don't have to watch it. You don't have to watch any of this stuff. That's the thing. Some people love it, like me.
Yeah, it's right. Yeah, but we are going to have a lot less local, and that's a tragedy. And I can't see a way out of that, because there is no more money coming into New Zealand television unless we go a bit more down my track, which is to say, okay, why don't we take every concept and say, how can I internationalise that? And that could be a game changer. That's certainly what they've done in Australia and Ireland. They've created a content image for themselves, which is very saleable to the world. We haven't done that.
Did you? Was Pop Stars yours? The making of True Bliss. Do you wish it was?
No, I wish it was, and it's fantastic because you know what? That it was the beginning of Idol.
Yeah, 100%. So
they ripped it off.
So it was.
It went from New Zealand to Australia. The rights,
Bardo,
the rights were actually sold to Australia, and then it went to England, and then it was successful in England, and they ripped it off and called it Pop Idol. And look at I think that was Jonathan Dowling, Pop Stars, and I actually that was the beginning. I see Joe Cotton quite often. As you know, since you got HQ, the half of True Bliss still sing together, and Yeah, it was a fantastic time. But at that time, that's what New Zealand was doing. We were punching above our weight. We were creating these things for the world. We don't do that now.
Did in hindsight, like did Jonathan, what's his name?
Jonathan Dowling.
Yeah. Did he fuck up by like selling the rights too early, or could he not see the vision of?
You said that,
right?
Tom, but it's really hard to take.
Would he be kicking himself? It's hard to know how big something can be.
I don't know.
Right?
I don't know him really, but It's also scary because, like, I got ripped off when I took my first one to the States. I ended up still owning just 25% of it. That's when I was looking for love bachelorettes in Alaska. And I didn't really know how a deal should be done. By the time I got to the chair, I was a bit more savvy and I kept all the rights. But also, you don't necessarily – I don't know if Jonathan that went into it with a vision for the world, whereas I went into everything with a vision of if I can get my content around the world, I don't have to go begging for money from New Zealand On Air, which was my worst nightmare.
Why was it your worst nightmare?
Because I'll tell you why.
Okay.
It's probably going to be really boring, but I bought a format out of England called Pioneer House.
I remember that. It was filmed just around the corner from me on Richmond Road.
I bought a house. We stripped it all back to what it would have been in 1860, I think it was. Or was it 1900? It was 1900. It was called 1900 House in there, and we called it Pioneer House. And we put a family in there, to live, right? Anyway, I went to New Zealand On Air asking for funding to do it. And at the time, a man called the late David Beatson was the chair. And anyway, they let me it was a reality TV show, so they were struggling. It wasn't worthy enough for them, even though what it was doing, it was bringing history to life. They could only have the same food, the same everything. We didn't even let them have real toilet paper. They were living as they would have lived in 1900. This family were fantastic. And I went to them, they let me talk to the board, and at that time the board thought they were very groovy because they had just appointed their first young person to the board. And he said, and I'm trying to remember his name now because you'll know him, he said, are you concerned that the children are going to suffer mentally from being deprived of PlayStation? And I was like stopping myself from saying, what the? And I was like, in my experience, my children haven't suffered from being deprived of PlayStation. And then David Beatson piped up with, what would you know about being deprived? And I stopped myself from turning and going, you try my childhood. But I didn't say it. I said nothing. But being me, I didn't forgive them for that stupid behaviour. Are
you a bit of a grudge holder like that, or you just don't forget things easily?
I don't forget.
Yeah.
But being me, I didn't give up. I was like, well, you know what you can do. And off I went and we made it anyway. And in fact, the bizarre thing is I think they funded it after all of that, after putting me through this torture. But that sort of niggly torture is something that, I think was a bit endemic at that time in television. And we made it and was hugely successful, and actually so much so that buses of people would come along that street and the family would sit out on their front deck on Sunday, because it was showing on air at the same time, and they would sit out on their deck on Sundays and wave to the people. There were buses of people from Hamilton coming to see the Pioneer House people. So yeah, that was great breakthrough television. Yeah,
it's a great show, and just the exponential advances in technology since that show was made, and now it'd be fantastic to do it again now. You think like would. Kids without their vapes and their and their phones,
wouldn't it?
No Wi-Fi in the house.
But you'd have to give them 3 years counselling, mental health counselling after it, of course, which I think they do on Married at First Sight Australia. I heard that now they get 3 years counselling.
When you watch TV now? Do you watch it with a critical eye? Like, what shows do you watch and think, "Fuck, I wish that was my show"? Like Married at First Sight, Love Island,
no,
The Voice, no.
Lego Wars,
Ninja
Warrior.
Ninja Warrior is great.
Don't you love Ninja Warrior?
Yeah, it's great.
I just love Lego Wars because it's so simple and. I love Hamish. I love the host. This Australian
Hamish Blake. Yeah.
Oh, I absolutely love him. But I love the simplicity of the concept. Oh, what I really think is, I wish I'd thought of that. That's how I think about a lot of those shows. But when it comes to some of the more emotionally charged shows, even Treasure Island is quite hard to handle the mental health of the contestants behind the scenes. They must be very, very difficult to handle. And that is always the hardest thing about making real television is, handling the effect that it can have on contestants who go in with their eyes wide open, especially now. They know exactly what they're doing. Usually it's their dream to become an influencer. But, people are way more fragile than they were then.
Yeah, because back when I did Treasure Island with you, I don't think the phrase duty of care was even like a thing.
Yeah, we knew how far to push you because we had a lot of medical advice. And as you know, we had a medical team on there, and which is why I'll never forget, I think we came down to a semi-final and we had, I think it was Coxie, the late John Cox, the builder, and Josh Cronfield and Brent Todd, I think they were. And I looked at Josh Cronfield and Brent Todd and I saw two big men who'd got really skinny in a matter of months, and I gave them quite a lot of meat to eat overnight just to try and... We were very conscious of it. But really, no one was ever... I don't think no one was in danger like that. But it was... people were just expected, I guess, to be more... I think people took more responsibility for themselves and for their own behaviour and their own decisions. Now people are very quick to want to offload that responsibility.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that's very fair.
That would make me worry.
Yeah.
But something I Love Island, all I can think about is, oh my God, I hope that girl's dad isn't watching this. What does he think?
Oh, what about Married at First Sight? Married at First Sight Australia, some of the best non-scripted
in the world.
Yeah, do you? That's like, I feel like that's what you'd be doing if you were doing this. No.
They need 3 years counselling after that.
But do you watch that and go, my God, I wish this was mine?
I watch it and I go, this is brilliantly, brilliantly cast. It's hard for me to watch a TV show and just watch it for enjoyment like other people. I can see how things happen. I can see how... people think it's not real, but actually it is real. The way people react to things is real. But in those constructed reality shows, what they do is they'll put an obstacle in front of you and they get the content from how you handle that obstacle. It's no different from the Kardashians. They only shoot 2 days a week, but they just load all the obstacles in one day, Here, your sister's doing this, what are you going to do? So it's not faked. What is introduced is the obstacle or the hurdle, and that creates all the content, as you can see. And that's what they do in Married at First Sight. Some of those, they'll ask them a question which is completely crazy. That's just to create content. So, yeah, but I believe the reactions, it's not nearly as faked as some people think. It just isn't.
Yeah, what are some of the tricks they use? Like the Australian one, it's like you see the dinner party and often it'll start and it's daytime outside and then it's nighttime. I think, oh really? Is that right? Yeah.
Have you ever noticed how much they drink?
Yeah, on Married at First Sight. On Love Island, I think I don't know if they have alcohol or maybe they have like one drink.
I'm not an avid watcher.
Yeah.
Clearly you are. Yeah. Well, your girlfriend
My girlfriend always has it on, but it just feels like it's the same. I don't even understand the concept as well, like how they decide who wins. Anyway,
I think they shoot it in Fiji.
Right.
Too. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are lots of things, but there are little things really. But human nature pretty much delivers. You don't have to. You definitely put obstacles in their way, otherwise people will just lie around the pool all day or do nothing all day. But human nature, even if people have got nothing to do, especially if you take away their devices, they won't be able to stop themselves from talking, gossiping, and then somebody said, he said, she said, and then, you've got content. I can see some of that now, but, when I watch television, so many amazing techniques. Have you watched Martha, the Martha Stewart doco on Netflix?
No, I've been meaning to.
You must.
Yeah, why?
It was probably 80 or 90 minutes long. They've done a master interview, one interview with Martha. The whole rest is, she clearly gave them her archive. So there's a bit of archive video footage and the rest is stills. Everybody else is audio only. It's like they mixed a podcast. So they've interviewed everybody else in her life, including her daughter, but you never see them. You don't see them. an interview, you just hear them talking over these stills. And I look at it and go, how clever is that? Netflix keeps raising the bar all the time for documentary makers. How clever is the way it's constructed? So when I watched Martha, not only did I love the content, and I must say I saw a little bit of myself in there, perhaps I'm not as extreme, but I did relate very much to her kind of loner, the way she was a loner, which I've kind of been a loner. But I watch the techniques and go, wow, how the bar has been raised on documentary making now.
Why is that clever? Just have the audio only with some images playing?
Because, if you've done a flash, what we see now, we see beautiful talking heads in every documentary, don't we? They thought, no, there's only one star here. Everybody else will just hear them talking like they've called up on the radio station. That's how it sounds.
Right.
And they're talking over still photos, and it works so beautifully.
Right, and you watch this and you think, fuck, why did I never think of that through my career? Really?
Yeah.
God, do you struggle to watch TV for fun?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except, I must confess to having watched all series of Queen of the South. Have you seen that?
Oh, the drug dealer one. Yeah.
A strong female lead. I sometimes drift in and out of Virgin River. Good old Martin Henderson, isn't it? Good.
He's fantastic.
Oh, and isn't he just getting older and handsomer? If handsomer is a word.
Aging very well.
He is, and so I sometimes I watch a little bit of that. So, but like you say, if you want to get on the treadmill, you need those long-running series.
Oh, we even got. I mean, there's so many shows we're not going to be able to bring up all the shows you've been involved with, but another one that's actually just been brought back for a reboot, Game of Two Halves. That's one of your shows.
Yes, yeah.
God, you created a lot of careers, didn't you?
Those two, Matthew and Marc, so I think their brilliance is underrated. I think, and I'm not sure, did I say to you that I had to make my own show reel for this honour last night? So I had to go back and find all those old shows. So I got to see a lot of them again. Matthew and Marc, the very first shoot I did with them, they said, what do we do? And I said, there's only one rule. There are three of you. It's you, and the camera is your third mate. You will always treat the camera like your third mate. It'll never be inward. It'll never be about you. And we still have problems in New Zealand television with people making TV for themselves, not for the audience. Matthew and Marc always treated the camera like the third person, and that was their absolute gift, and it remained their gift the whole time. And that's why they were brilliant. But, I found the famous episode, and there's all sorts of Facebook pages about them, the famous episode where the walkout, where Matthew... Where they
from the episode of Game of Two Halves.
Yeah,
where they're mocking him for...
Matthew's marriage had broken up, and they played back footage of Sally talking about him, and they teased him so much and replayed it so much he, dropped his chair, had a hissy fit and walked out. And he could do that then because that's what they used to do. And there were Mike King and Martin Dillon was screaming with laughter. And I can't stop myself from laughing about it, and so many people talk about it. They could do that. And then one episode, I remember now, Matthew had a new love of his life. And so every question, the answer was either her first name or her last name. I must say, this is Nikki Watson. So the answer to every question was either Watson or Nikki. And we did that. We did that sort of stuff. Now, you couldn't do the sort of stuff we did now. So
why? Because it's bullying or it's defamation or...
No, I just think it's like...
People are too sensitive?
Yeah, people are not only too sensitive. People would think... Oh, I'm not sure. Their humour probably wouldn't travel as well. It'd be seen as so blokey. But it was a lot. When I listened to Matthew talk about it as it just happened, it didn't just happen. He was very disciplined. Marc probably less so, but he was very disciplined. He was always on time and all that. Like, as I said at the very beginning, how much I love Mark Richardson. Always on time and always well prepared. And I think that. It looked chaotic, and it was recorded it was half-hour show. It was recorded in 40 minutes. They were incredibly efficient, but they really knew what they were doing, and they knew they sometimes didn't know what was acceptable and what wasn't. They'd push their luck, but they really knew how to entertain. They were, they were exceptional, and I think, we should look back at them and realise that really, how exceptional they were. But we don't, you see, because I don't think the dance show ever won an award because people were too shitty and jealous.
Right.
People are terribly, and I think that's
Is that tall
slightly
poppy?
sad. Yes, very much. Yeah, very much, especially amongst those, in those two. But yeah, there were lots of careers. Like Jeremy Corbett's first show was with me. He played Clark
Bent on the Paradise Picture
Show.
Yeah.
Yes. April Uremia, Bernadine Oliver Kirby, even Andrew Saville did his first TV show with me. So there've been lots of them, I kind of came from an era when I was executive producer of rugby at TVNZ where we were trying to get more and more ex-players to talk about it. And so, I introduced a lot of those ex-players into television. But it's been a great ride.
Yeah, so TV careers you started. Marc and Matthew, definitely, right?
Marc Marc was doing Sports Cafe. It was originally Matthew and Zinzan Brooke, and then Zinzan pulled out, and so that's how Marc came in. That was Ansett New Zealand Time of Your Life with Petra Baggist. And Hamish Mackay
as well.
Yeah, Hamish Mackay.
He started his career from Palmerston North.
Yeah, that's the second time. The first time he was supposed to be doing Mountain Dew on the Edge, but he was too scared. So it became Lana and Wendy Botha because Hamish was too scared. He was. He's like, we got him to the first bungee jump. He's like, I can't do this. I'm going to wet myself. So he never made it. So he got a show and then lost it on day one of shooting because he wasn't brave enough. But so he got taken over by two girls, and then Jane Kiley joined the cast, and there were three of them. So, yeah.
So for anyone that doesn't remember the Marc and Matthew stuff, think like Hamish and Andy before Hamish and Andy, John and Ben before John and Ben. So they were these two ex-sports stars that just had this amazing charisma and on-screen chemistry, and it was like they'd dare each other to do stuff.
They would,
wildly.
and they always laughed with people, not at people.
And send themselves up.
They were actually at the same time as Havoc and Newsboy, but they were very different. And they were. And the Australians quite often say to me, some Australians say to me, you know what, Matthew and Marc were the precursor to Hamish and Andy. They started, when they saw Matthew and Marc, the Australians started looking for their own Matthew and Marc. But, they did Ansett New Zealand Time of Your Life, and then they did, obviously we're doing Game, and then they did Rocky Road and went all over the world, and I went to some places with them, India, and I probably clearly should have gone to Japan with them. Matthew might not have gone as a stray. What he did say that in that recent article, he did say that that's where he first found the drugs. But he did say that Treasure Island saved him, which is kind of nice.
How did you wrangle all these people? Did you just turn a blind eye to things? Like I've had Mike King on the podcast, and he talked about how much coke he was doing during Game of Two Halves. Yeah. Did you see this stuff going, or was it all sort of secretive? Or
well, I did actually. I look back, and I did the same thing actually with Paul Henry, who was somebody who needed a lot of discipline to get the best out of him. I was kind of like their friend, but I always held a little bit of fear, so that when I said don't, they didn't. And I think that's because I never got too close to them. I was probably closer to Matthew than all the rest of them put together because our families were friends. But they knew that there was a line I'd never cross. And I guess they also all thought that I would probably cut them if I wanted to. I mean, I was... Mike worked for me I did a chat show, Mike King chat show with Mike during the worst time. He was a very difficult man to wrangle too, and we argued a lot, But we still had that, I think they had respect that I knew what was going to work. And, Martin Devlin as well. And, and they used to give poor Tony Veach such a hard time, It was, when I heard Game of Two Halves was coming back, I was like, holy moly. You really need a host who's going to be able to take every slap because that's what they used to do. But it was good-natured.
Yeah, the reboot hasn't really worked that well. I don't know, is that fair to say? I feel it hasn't had the cut through, and I wonder if that's just because of where things are at now with...
I'm not sure really. I know that it's really important in the format to make the sports stars look like stars. So what we used to do is we used to give the sports stars some answers, because when you're competing against Devlin and King and Ridge and Ellis, those boys, their sports knowledge of all sport, they were like encyclopedias. They knew everything, especially American sport, any sport. So no sports star who had a real job could compete with them. So we used to just give them a few answers so they felt better. Otherwise, you would find yourself that you'd paid all this money for a sports star to be the third person, and they didn't get a word. In fact, one famously we gave all the answers to, and they wrote them all over their hand. Oh. And then when we asked a question about themselves, they didn't get the answer right.
Hang on.
A certain Olympic twins, certain Olympic twins.
Oh, one of the Evers Swindells.
Yeah.
But also very hard being in that environment where there's these established relationships and they could finish each other's sentences and you're being thrown into the lion's den.
Sports stars love sports stars. That's what I've discovered.
And so these people that you work closely with and whose careers you sort of help shape, what's your sort of role when scandal hits, whether it's a drug scandal or Brent Todd with there was a pokie machine scandal and he ended up on home D at Matthew Ridge's house, or Vici with the domestic violence?
Yeah.
Like, how do you...
well, Vici, that was long after for me. And I wasn't close to Vici, but I was very close to Brent Todd. And, you have no idea, but in the end you can't... I don't dump people because they made mistakes, and... Yeah,
you're fiercely loyal, aren't you?
I am really loyal, and I'm loyal to people who have been incredibly loyal to me, Around that time, Brent Todd, who was probably just about the most popular, New Zealand league player we'd ever seen with 1,000 friends, when he was on home D, he had Matthew and me. They just disappeared into the sunset, and I saw that people think home D is really easy, but I saw how incredibly isolating it was for him, It was just him and Matthew was always out. But, Matthew would go away for a week and he would be home alone. He was allowed to, I think they allowed him to go on a run once a day on a specific route. But I would argue could be harder than prison because you are so alone and it's so isolated. So and he's done really well since then, and he well and truly learned his lesson. And in the celebrity drug scandal, as it was called. Oh, for heaven's sake. What was it that Marc did? A couple of tablets?
Procuring pills, whatever. So basically hooking up your mates, which you...
Or
something. I mean, you look back now, I think the way policing's changed, like it wouldn't even be a thing. Like, actually, you can take your pills to a festival and get them tested.
Yeah, that's right. They would have got them charged. They wouldn't have got charged, but also they would have be looking for who supplied them more than anything. But, there's been plenty of scandals, but
what about that? That seemed like a particularly hard time for Marc.
Marc's got real personal strength and incredible family. He's an only child. He's got really, really strong family ties, and also he had business confidence. Marc's incredibly confident and really sure of himself. So like neither of those boys, and I may be wrong, I don't think either of those boys suffer greatly from self-doubt, and they have a lot of personal strength, which enabled them to get over things like that.
Well, thanks for sharing that. That reminds me of there was a documentary I saw about Lance Armstrong, the disgraced cyclist, and he talked about people leaning in or leaning out, and he's like, when the shit hits the fan, you will be surprised at how few of your circle actually lean in.
That's right.
But I feel like you're a leaner-inner.
I always lean in. Well, I know that shit's never going to hit the fan with someone like Marc Richardson, and I only see him once every 6 months, but to me he helped me make the block what it was. When I started the block, he was always, and actually the network wanted Marc Ellis to be the host of the block, and I chose Marc Richardson because I was like, I need someone who's always going to be there on time, lines learnt, and he's so disciplined. He was like that. So he made my life better. He made the show better. And he was someone who was always looking to, what else can I do to make the show better? And I, and now I have nothing but admiration for him. But the ones I admire are always the ones who give me something, Holmes, Paul Henry, just because he makes me laugh. You know that old game, who would you like at a dinner party? I mean, who wouldn't want him?
Yeah, he's fabulous company.
Did he try and talk you into being a nudist? He tries to talk everybody into becoming a nudist.
No, but he's he just has no. People are like, Paul Henry would turned up to the opening of an envelope, but he wouldn't. Like he actually, it was hard to get him on my podcast. Actually.
He doesn't like people that much. Yeah, but also he says, I bought a boat because I can't exactly go to nudist beaches because of who I am. So I bought a boat. I'm like, I absolutely, when they have talent and they're great company, it's it's fabulous. I mean, April Yeremia, we're still great friends. That she's another person. So she's director of sport at Westlake Girls High now.
Wow.
So she's out of television, but she's another person who had something incredibly special, you know, and there was never any tokenism there, you know. She was obviously Samoan, but she was great at what she did, and so you get a bit proud, and I'm feeling that now because with this legend thing, I've had to look back on all the old shows and see those shows and just realise, you know, there were so many people who passed through our company in those early days.
Yeah, and so many careers that you had a hand in making. It should fill you with pride. Are there any shows that you look back now and you regret making? What are the ones you... What?
I'm laughing because when I made the show reel about myself, I put in the 2 that got cancelled as well. So I thought, let's just lay it all out there, shall we?
What 2 got cancelled? You could easily leave them out.
The footy show got cancelled.
Oh, right, like a New Zealand version of that.
Yeah,
oh, I don't even...
do you not remember why? I'm not going to tell you. And then the second one that got cancelled was called You Be the Judge, where we did a DNA test live on air. Oprah had done it the week before.
It's very Jerry Springer.
It was okay for Oprah. It was Oprah then.
Yeah, a lot of people forget before Oprah was Oprah, she was like a trashy show, like along with Phil Donahue and Ricky Lake. And
hey, that little boy's got a father now. But anyway, we did do... Not everything's good.
What happened with the footy show? How many episodes?
Oh, it was terrible. So we actually borrowed a little challenge from a British game show where 2 players would be blindfolded and they would touch another player to work out who it was. Probably shouldn't have done it with 2 former All Blacks and a female cricketer. There was nothing inappropriate about it. You were strictly but you could work out who it was from. I know.
Oh, but you live and learn.
Should never have done that.
You live and learn, don't you?
Well, you know, everybody saw it. You know, the network had seen it. And it went to air 2 weeks later and suddenly everyone's in uproar. I'm like, you all saw it and you didn't say anything. We could have cut it out. But anyway, but to be honest, in the hundreds of shows to have, now I laugh at those shows. It's funny because, you know, if 10 years ago, if you'd brought that up, I would have balked at it and refused to talk about it. Now I go, you know, nothing ventured, nothing gained. You know, nobody died.
Yeah, and there's that saying, fortune favours the brave.
It does actually. That's a good old-fashioned saying. And, you know, now I do feel brave, you know, even going back, even, you know, obviously I own a company that has been based in natural history. And even though now we're doing true crime, we're doing all sorts of stuff, and 2 sports docs. We're doing one with Auckland FC, you know, the new football club, which has been fantastic. They're just wonderful. And I don't know if you've seen, if you've seen much of the Port, their fan base is amazing. And so
they've done an incredible job, eh?
Oh, it's
just
wonderful.
remarkable.
It's wonderful to see. And because Ellie Williams, you know, Ellie and Anna, and, you know, Ellie's absolutely determined that he's going to do it right. And I love seeing that. And then to do Poi Stories with the Black Ferns. So still doing a little bit in New Zealand, but really almost impossible to survive a company, be a good employer, be able to pay your staff, you know, over Christmas when there's no work coming in, being able to invest in people. We have to have a lot of programs from overseas with bigger budgets.
What needs to be done to save the future of New Zealand TV? Can the government force Netflix to spend more money in New Zealand, or is there anything that can be done like that to make more local?
The Australian government was successful in that, which is why I don't think Netflix isn't doing virtually nothing in New Zealand now. They took all the money to Australia to satisfy the Australian government. I think if our government said to Netflix, either put more into production or you have to leave the country, I think they'd leave the country.
Oh my God.
Or actually there'd be an outrage and it wouldn't happen. That's not going to happen. Our only way forward, and this is just my personal opinion, is we need to stop navel gazing as much and make all our shows with more international appeal. We can do it. We've done it before.
What would give a show more international appeal? How do you mean? like saleability and like what you did with the chair and
Well, not that's formats.
Oh, okay.
But think carefully about will the international audience understand this, understand what's going on, or is it just an inward joke, How would I make this appeal to Americans? If Americans are watching this show, what would they think? Even on Poi Stories, for example, we use a lot of even basic translation just because even though because the Black Ferns naturally use te reo in their everyday conversation, we make sure that it's in context, so it's really easy to understand what they're talking about. And that's really important because anything on NZR Plus is for an international audience. At the same time, we've made a 30% te reo version of it for Kata Māori, which is of the same show, but we definitely have our eye on the international audience, even something as, as kind of like you'd think as New Zealand as Poi. We do that. And I think there's many things. Our funders have got to be more commercial in funding. We've got to, if we look at what does the world want now? The world wants dating shows and true crime.
True crime. Oh, my God. The most massive podcast genre, right? Are you a podcast lady?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. What are you into?
I do listen to quite a few. I listen to a few true crime ones. I listen to the BBC ones because I like when they push the boundaries. Like I'm more into audio documentaries. So I like. There's one, the Shamima Begum one from the BBC. Now she's one of those 3 girls from Birmingham who went off to thinking they could become ISIS brides. And I don't know if you know that they're quite famous. It's quite a famous story. They were 15 years old, and 3 of them went off to Iraq and became brides, and 2 of them, I think, are dead, and 1 lived, and she's now still in a refugee camp in Iraq, and England has got rid of her citizenship, erased it or whatever, wow. So she's got nowhere to go. She's sitting there, Jemima Begum, and she's now gone from wearing the full burqa back to, the baseball caps and the Lululemon and that, and I don't know where the Lululemon came from, but and you can feel him walking through that refugee camp. You can hear him. The kids come up to him and he talks. I'm kind of into that adventurous sort of thing, and then also into some other ones which change the genre. Like, do you know who Lucy Letby is? So Lucy Letby is a British nurse who's been
that killed all the babies.
Yeah, been convicted of all the baby killing. Well, 2 actually Daily Mail journalists followed it every day, but they weren't allowed to give their opinions. They were only allowed to tell you what actually happened in court. And I found that actually, as a different way of doing a podcast, quite fascinating. And then there's other ones, like one of my favourites is Up and Vanishing out of the States, which is a true crime one where there's a Tara Grinstead, their first series, where they actually 10 years later they solved the crime. They solved the crime. And so I quite like those ones too, but I'm a bit of a audio documentary kind of, person.
When you listen to them, are you?
And I listen to yours, of course. Which
mostly
people say, "Did you just hear what Paul Henry said about you?"
I think you've probably been mentioned in more podcast episodes than anyone else. Marc Richardson, Paul Henry, Matthew Ridge. Yeah, you've come up a lot. Oh, yeah, Paul Henry told a story about you about something that Why did you raise an eyebrow? It's not a bad story.
Because we had a text interaction about the story, which I read out to you, of course. I love Paul Henry. I love the way he embellishes stories. He's a fabulous storyteller, isn't he?
No, but he wasn't throwing you under the bus. If my memory serves me correctly, it's something like he was on hosting This Is Your Life, and there was something wrong with the curtain in the background, and you're like, oh, we need to get that changed. And the one of the stagehands said, oh, that's impossible. And you were like, no, it's not impossible. And sure enough, they got the curtain changed to your satisfaction by the end of the day.
They did, and that was probably true. I can only vaguely remember that. But Paul, it was very nice that Paul said it, that taught him that actually he should always demand higher standards in his own shows. And that is kind of nice. But him saying he was scared of me, I don't think Paul was ever scared of anyone.
Do you love that though? Do you love knowing that you were terrifying to some people?
No, I laughed. I know I'm not terrifying to him. I laughed. I found it funny. It was the old thing. When you do This Is Your Life, it's the hardest show ever to produce. You've spent 2 months delving as deep as you can into someone's life without them knowing. You have tried to get their wife not to tell them, and I know at least half the times the wives couldn't stop themselves and definitely told the subjects. You're trying to keep everything secret. You're trying to manage people. Like Michael Jones' mother the day before said, unless you bring 30 rallies from Samoa, we're pulling out of it, we're not doing it. And I'm like, oh no. You know, you get all these stresses on doing it. And then, you know, there's I think there was about a 20-minute delay between when we shot it and when it came on air. And then once Paul Holmes might have had a few the night before and not been a very good nick and called Lance Cairns a hockey player instead of a cricket player when he surprised him, which didn't help. And then we bought Ian Botham from England for the same one and may have got waylaid in Sydney when he met someone on a plane and, you know, and like suddenly This Is Your Life Tonight and where's Ian Botham? Oh, he'll be on the 3 o'clock. You know, like, so the stress. And then Zinzan Brooks, it starts hailing on the cloud in Auckland and you can't hear the show. And I don't know if you know much about Zinzan, but he's got about 7 kids. And all the kids go into Paul Holmes' dressing room and start playing around. And Paul Holmes says, Paul Holmes, was it? Yeah, had a hissy fit because there's all these kids in the dressing room. So you're managing all sorts of things. And then you finally get to the end of it and the person is so happy usually. And you look at them and you go, I know so much about you and you don't even know who I am. Or they're unhappy. The biggest problem always was, you know, kids would say, I'm not coming on unless my mum comes on. Well, your dad left your mum for his current wife and so we're going to have maybe a little bit of friction here. How do you manage that friction, you know? So you're always, a lot of ex-wife management, a lot of wives who didn't love their husbands that much management, you see a lot of flaws and great. In the famous Grant Fox one, the one where I'd had the baby 2 days before, Alan Dale, who's a very famous non-American Australian actor, he'd judged Miss Universe or something with Grant Fox. We bring him on, big Australian actor. Grant Fox can't remember him, has no idea who he is, can't remember any of it. And they'd had a big night out and it was all like, Alan Dale thought they were buddies for life. Grant Fox can't remember. We surprised Michael Jones. Michael Jones says, isn't this show just for old and dead people? Like, what? So, like and then we surprised Jonah Lomu, who was absolutely horrified and hated every minute of it, of course. So, yeah, it exhausts you. No wonder the format isn't made. I have tried to bring it back a few times, but it's very expensive and quite hard to make. Did
you love that period of your life, though? Like white-knuckling it? You know, just, the cortisol levels were constantly being redlining.
Particularly on that show.
Yeah.
And you knew what they thought of the... I mean, I chose to do some quite different ones, like Scott Dixon, after he won his the Indy 500, which is, I don't know if you realise, it's the biggest live sports race in the world. And, you know, that's 10 years ago before he was a superstar like he is now. So, you know, you could tell by the choice of subject what they'd think. Like Malvina Major, who was an opera singer, was like, you could tell within 5 minutes, you know, well, you could see what the audience thought about the subject. So it was incredibly important who that first person you brought up was, you know. But it was I mean, made a few mistakes in it, but it was fantastic television, you know, very exciting.
Why doesn't it come back? Like, think of the great New Zealanders that, money, really?
It's really expensive to make. It's a lot of prep. Quite often you have to pay the people to come now. I know, it's astonishing, but you do. When I first started doing it, we didn't pay anyone, but you do. You know, if you're going to bring a superstar from overseas, you're going to pay first class airfares. You've you know, it's a lot of cameras, big kind of studio. It's probably, now it would be close to $400,000 an episode to make.
Yeah, no one's got the appetite for that, do they?
Well, you know, we could do it once a year.
Yeah.
But, you know, now you've got to be sure you get the advertising in it and, you know, what's the sponsor going to? You know, we used to have great deals like Air New Zealand used to fly people in. We were always scrambling for the last cents to make it. But it is one of the world's greatest ever formats. And, you know, I had the pleasure of starting with Bob Parker, then Paul Holmes, and then Paul Henry. So I had the pleasure of kind of doing it with all of them. We had a lot of arguments along the way with TVNZ. They always were trying to change the presenter on me. And plenty of times, thank heavens I owned the rights, I would say no. no. And
Well, who did they want? Just whoever they were pushing at the time. You give me a look like I should not. Like who? Like Simon Dallow? No, who?
Simon Dallow was mentioned once. Yes,
Right.
he was. Yeah, but they were always. I don't know why they didn't get it. That how important the host was, because the host is mostly talking to amateur talent, and therefore the host has rehearsed the story with the talent. You rehearse the show. You spend all day rehearsing the show. So if it's amateur talent, the host needs to know the story back to front. So when the person completely forgets the story, the host carries them along.
Yeah, holds their hand. Yeah.
And Holmes particularly was a brilliant listener. And so Holmes would always carry along. Paul Henry, I was never quite sure if he was listening, but
and what about from a personal level, like criticism over the year about being like a hard female boss? I feel like, well, no, you know how like if you're a hard male boss in the 90s or the 2000s, you'd be just called like a boss, but you would have been called like a ball breaker or a tyrant.
Well, that was the desperate pursuit of perfection, I think. We always wanted to be the best, and probably was too hard on people then, not nearly as much now.
So you don't think it was like highlighted or extra unfair for you based on your sex?
No. When I was executive producer of rugby at TVNZ in the mid-90s, and I didn't really see it then, and I've never seen kind of a glass ceiling of being female. I've always had male mentors. All my mentors have been males, and I've always just, if I couldn't get in the front door, I'd go in the window. I was one of those people who was so tenacious I wouldn't give up on anything. So, I probably was, but I never expected anyone to work harder than me. And we used to have, Touchdown used to have the best parties. When our show rated, we'd have champagne and sausage rolls, for morning tea. There's a song which, the Monkey song, I'm a Believer, used to be our theme song. And, if you believed in that company, you stayed there. So it used to be a work hard, play hard company. And, what it was like when you used to have your parties, your rating parties, especially when you and JJ were absolute top of the pile. You know how important that was. That's exactly the culture we had, was work hard, play hard. And that's why so many people stayed there so long. There's people who are there then who are back working for me now. There were people who stayed on at Warner's ever since, worked, even when Warner's bought it, they were still there. So you could say that, but if I hadn't been, I don't know. What would there have been as much success if I hadn't been tough?
No, but I feel like there's like a culture now or an expectation where no one wants to work. This is a sweeping generalisation. I remember when Elon Musk took over Twitter and turned it to X, he said he doesn't want people working from home. He wants people that are going to be there first thing in the morning and be there last thing at night. And it was like raised eyebrows for people. But
I don't believe in working from home anymore. I think working from home is not good in creative industries. I'm absolutely anti-working from home.
Yeah. Going
forward. I have the pleasure now going forward of knowing, having had so many people work for me over all these years, I can really pick and choose now, and that's fantastic, So now I pretty much know that I've got a wonderful, staff now of, one of them who's just come back to work for us actually was a contestant, and we used to quite often employ contestants, I was a contestant in Miss Popularity, which was a show we made many years ago. And, that was her big break to have ever gone on a reality show and then come and work for us. And now she's still working for us. So.
Oh, yeah. Actually, on the series of Treasure Island that I was on, there was a guy there working on building sets called Sam. And he was a contestant on a Truman show.
Living the Dream, yeah.
Living the Dream. So it was a reality show, but he was the only contestant. And it was all actors around him in this house.
That was my house, actually. We did that in my house. That was a really great format. We actually bought that from the States. It was called the Joe Schmo Show. And Sam went on to continue. I think I'm not sure if he did the last Treasure Island, but he's done the last few Treasure Islands. He's a police dog handler now in Palmerston North. Wow. He lives in Fielding. He's in Palmerston North. He's a police dog handler now. But that show was such a risk, and we don't have those sort of big risks anymore.
We haven't even talked about the governance stuff yet. How much of a hurry are you in? Have you got?
I'll just.
What's your next thing?
Probably got another 15.
Okay. it'd be good to talk about this. The
Hold on a second.
being on the board for the 2011 World Cup, the Women's Rugby World Cup, and also the
Well, I
flag.
love the Women's Rugby World Cup.
Do you get paid for these things, or is this like a
Oh,
volunteer
you do,
thing?
you do.
Just give,
So I started.
Fuck all though, I
the
guess.
first one was New Zealand Trade and Enterprise,
Yeah.
which obviously helps New Zealand companies get into the overseas market. And the next one was Rugby World Cup 2011, where I was the only female on the board and quite a lot younger than anyone else. So I've always been. I started out on boards, I was still a working CEO, and that's very different when you're doing governance because most people are retired. So, and I liked that because it makes you match fit. You know what it's like to have to find money to pay the wages and things like that. So that worked quite well. And then New Zealand Story, which helps New Zealand companies market themselves overseas, and then World Expo Dubai 2020, and it kind of went on, and the flag consideration panel and.
Yeah, what was that? I had Sir John Key on the podcast recently, and he talked about the flag thing. And I think the country he gave as an example was Canada, where they just changed it without a referendum. And he's like, in hindsight, I should have just changed the flag.
He should have. And you know what? I walked in there. I walked into that committee with an open mind. I left thinking we missed a great opportunity. And there was so much bitching about the $21 million, cost. What no one got was that actually 14 million of it was a paper transaction to New Zealand Post to deliver it was actually all about to deliver the ballots. It was actually all about, it's government department, essentially government to government, right? So that was all rubbish. But TVNZ, I think, did that poll in New York, and they showed the flag to 50 people, and 50 people said it was Australian. And that to me was like, what are we doing? At that time, our economy was in great shape. We were really showing Australia up on the world stage, and we missed our chance. Insanity. I so wanted that silver fern on the flag, but mostly I didn't want that Union Jack on the flag.
Do you think part of the issue in hindsight was just people voting against John Key, people that didn't like John Key saying, no, it's a John Key vanity project?
The difference was only 4%. We forget.
Or was it a design thing? Because the design they were going with was kind of...
Well, we looked at hundreds and hundreds of designs.
Laser Kiwi was the winner.
Yeah. We had, the one I see quite a lot still, the white on black, the white fern on the black. That's one I loved in the end, But you see those flags around all the time. You still see them. And I went to the following World Cup and I had the one I liked, I've still got all the flags. It was our chance. It really didn't matter which one, but it was our chance to come out from under the shadow of Australia. And what are we doing with the Union Jack on our flag still? I mean, I'm, in spite of, bless her dear heart, I got my Damehood from the Queen and that. I'm not much of a royalist these days. And I relate that to, to the royal, to being a royalist. So, that was, I was disappointed but not devastated. Yeah. And then, obviously, I applied for the New Zealand Rugby Board, and they gave me a job in their commercial committee, and then I applied again. They offered me. I was chair of the All Blacks Experience, which was set up in Sky City, and then they offered me the Women's Rugby World Cup, and that was the most amazing experience of my life. We had a big strategy, 3 words: fill Eden Park, and it worked, and set world records for women's rugby. The feeling really gave rugby a huge lift, and man, I was so proud of that. Yeah,
and you didn't have to give away tickets.
Gave away none.
No,
because we didn't want to. We felt like it was kind of sad.
Patronising.
No one had ever paid to be in a women's rugby be women's rugby, and so we didn't want to. And I think the lease were $10, but we gave away 33,000 poi, and it was. For so many of those players, the show I've recently made, Poi Stories, 4 of those women were in that team, and they look at that footage. I made them look back at it, and they cry now. They when they see the crowds, the poi. And Stacey Walker said an interesting thing. She said they actually knew our names. People were calling out our names. She said we'd heard cheering before, but they were calling out our names. So I think will we get that euphoria back into rugby? Probably rugby needs to look a bit deeper at why it worked.
Yeah, that must be just immensely satisfying though, because it's easy to take for granted in hindsight what happened with that tournament. But before that, women's rugby was kind of a token thing. It was like the curtain raiser
to men's,
in the afternoon before the men's. Yeah, and it sort of
we really showed
change.
them up. But Michelle Hooper, who was the tournament director, was incredible. She had an incredible team. I was just the chair, but very much on the strategy, when you're on boards, it's actually all about the strategy. And the strategy was to fill Eden Park. And then we thought, if we do that, then they'll all come. And they did. And what about Rita Ora's outfit? Do you remember that?
No, I don't.
You don't?
It'll be on YouTube. I'll look it up.
You need to go and have a look and you'll go, wow.
Well, clearly Taika saw her and went, wow. Were they together then, or was that
Yeah, they were.
Oh, they were? Okay.
I think, yeah, definitely were, yeah.
What about biggest adversity and challenges, like personal and professional? You've had a couple of marriages, eh? Is that the biggest adversity?
Well, I know what I'm not good at. Put it that way.
But you're not a quitter.
I won't be going again.
Oh, really? Really?
Yeah, that's true.
So your first one is that the baby daddy?
No, second one. John Christie was the first one, was where I got my last name.
Right. How long did the first one last?
Well, I was with him for 9 years.
Yeah. And the
second one 13.
Yeah.
And the second one, he's always been a great dad to my two kids. So they still have a great relationship with him. So, yeah, I mean, I know that my job puts stresses on my marriage. And, I've been told your work's more important than me more times than you can count. But,
Did that hurt, like a gut punch at the time? Or you sort of like, well, yeah,
I think
it actually is.
I think my fear of poverty was probably greater.
Yeah.
Which I don't have so much now. But yeah, the fear of poverty was probably a driver there. But, I appreciate, the relationship I've been in the last 10 years, he knew me, long before we had a relationship, so he knows what he's getting. It doesn't matter how many shopping bags I walk in the house with, he's never going to say, how much did that cost?
Well, it's your money as well. But also, I think you're probably a calmer person now than what you were.
Oh, yeah.
The sting goes out. I don't know. Apart from your brother, I think he's the exception to the rule, but I think people mellow as they get into their, sort of mid-years.
Mellow. That's mellow for him. He is mellow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe a little.
What about so you've just won this award, that like basically a Lifetime Achievement Award, the Legend Award. There's the Damehood, the Verve Clicquot Entrepreneur of the Year Award. You've won lots of stuff. What about legacy? What are your thoughts on that?
The moment I feel like the legacy is the people that have learnt from our shows and my experiences, and there are so many of them, not just the front of the presenters, but much more the people behind the scenes. There are literally hundreds of people who've worked on those shows, and I went through the awards. I had a look last night at who's nominated for awards. So many of those people were part of the early Touchdown and iWorks, and that's probably the legacy, I think. But, one of the stupidest things that's ever happened to me in my life is I was asked to speak at a conference, and I followed Stephen Tyndall, which is always a hard act to follow. And Kim Hill was the host, and she said, we all know what Stephen Tyndall's contributed to this country. What good are they going to say about you? And I thought, which shows the deeply bitter woman that she was anyway, more than it says anything about me. And I couldn't think of anything. And I was like, and she went, what will they say on your grave? And I'm hopeful they'll say, I entertained some people and I was a good mother. And I was like, I can't believe that. I was flabbergasted, but they asked me to do the next one, and I said, who's hosting it?
Who's the MC?
And I said, no.
Yeah. Well, you sort of covered this off, I guess, in a roundabout way, but I had this guy, Dougal Allen, on the podcast, who's like a part of Team New Zealand that just won the America's Cup, and he's done some adventure sports races with Richie McCaw. And he said on one of the adventure races with Richie, in the middle of the night, Richie came up with a game that everyone had to give 3 words that they'd like to be used about them at their funeral.
Wow.
And one of Richie's words was integrity, and Dougal was like, that's funny because that's what I would have said about him. What about you? 3 words at your funeral.
Loyal.
Yeah.
Loving, probably, especially towards my family, and generous, I guess.
3 great words.
Yeah, I just care more about myself as a person than I care about myself as a TV producer. The older I get, the more I care, about being a good person. I always have, because I was brought up that way, but now I'm not. I'm not intimidated. Honestly, you could say what you like now. You could call me a cultural vandal.
Cultural vandal, yeah, that's another one. God, there's so many. Geez, they sting, eh? They stick with you. These servants
They don't
sort
stick
of...
with you till you get an award like this and everyone brings them up.
No, I had them to bring up, but you brought them up. You front-footed it.
Oh, I might as well. I laugh,
Well, I've always found you a very good person. You must have found over the years there's a lot of people that, like a lot of ass kissers that are nice to you because they feel like you can give them a job or something. Or no?
Oh, yeah, not so much. I mean, I have a lot of... I've made some great friendships. Most of my friendships are about television. And then I have a whole friend group of women, of about 15 women who have nothing to do with television, who I spend a lot of time with, and they never pitch me a TV show, which is really good. Ever. They never say, So I have two sides to my life. Side which never pitches me, side which pitches me all the time.
Yeah. Well, I think those words are great. You are definitely one of the most loyal people I know, and and you're
Thank
kind
you.
and you're sensitive, and finally got you in. How's it been? Not too punishing?
It's good. And it's been really good. And I meant to bring this up, but we talk about storytelling, and I hope this doesn't hurt you, Dom, but one of the greatest current affairs story I've ever seen on television was the story about you and JJ and your fertility battle. At a time when, it was a Sunday night current affairs show. I think it was Sunday.
Sunday, yeah.
Yeah.
John Hudson.
I'll never forget that story, and how, and I kind of, I knew you obviously, but, when it's a bit of a pity with current affairs stories that they don't stay up there forever, because that was one of the great stories they ever did about a relatively soft and, a subject a lot of people have been through, but it was absolutely brilliant. I remember seeing it and going, oh my God, that is phenomenal storytelling. And it was really about your honesty. And I think in radio, maybe it was radio that enabled you to show your real selves, and you showed your real selves, and not a lot of people do. Maybe you do less as you've got older. But yeah, certainly in that. And then, I used to listen to you guys on the edge every morning when I was driving to work just to see what stupid thing you would do. I think one day you had a masseuse in the studio or something, and you were describing in great detail what was going on, and I was screaming with laughter in my car. So you two have made a great contribution to the business.
I don't know. I think we're cultural vandals as well.
Oh, God, wouldn't life be boring if we didn't have cultural vandals?
Hey, this has been wonderful. Dame Julie Christie, thank you so much.
Thanks, Dom.